second, I just want to let you know that we're going to be showing a video and also of something, I don't know, I guess it's a video from the city of Takoma Park. And then that will be followed by a discussion, question and answers. So please put your questions in the chat if they come up while we're talking. And if not, then you can ask your questions live afterwards. I'll probably start with the chat questions first, just so you know, because we'll go in order from when they came in. And anyway, yeah, the second part of our program will be a discussion and question and answer. So Kit, take it away.
Hi, all. I'm delighted to do this program. And even though it sort of pulled together quickly, there's, as Catherine said, there'll be basically 4 parts to this. There's a 12-minute video of me walking around and yakking in my yard with a mask on. So, but it seems like actually you can hear me. And then there's a 3-minute video with Daryl Braithwaite, who's the head of public works in Takoma Park, talking about giving additional reasons why it would be helpful if you left your leaves on the ground this year. And then I will do a very quick somewhat expansion on why and how to leave the leaves on the ground. And then we will do questions from the chat and then throw it open for discussion, hopefully in a semi-organized way. Being that there are 86 people on at the moment, that it may end up being something that works better on chat, but we'll see. So we're going to start out with John Pitt of the city of Takoma Park, who will share his screen, starting first with me and then going with Daryl.
Today, we're going to talk about how to handle people's leaves. And you're here in my yard. I live just outside of Takoma Park in Silver Spring, and I follow the same kinds of rules that the city of Takoma Park does, which is that I don't use pesticides and I don't use fertilizers except for just regular organic materials from the yard. The thing that we're going to try to replicate here is what a forest looks like. People for the last 50 or 70 years have been treating their yards like they needed to be pristine and single species, just grass, and it can only be grass. But increasingly in Takoma Park and in other places, we're discovering that for a more healthy area to support bees and butterflies and birds, we need to pretend to be a forest. And even a regular old yard can pretend to be a forest. So if we're going to replicate a forest instead of acting like this is just a monoculture, there's a couple different things that we can do. The best thing you can do, and where you can, you should do this. You should, if you've got an area like this that's not planted in grass, that's just got shrubs and trees and ground cover, you can let the leaves, or the needles in this case, you've got a great big pine tree, just sit on the ground and they will decompose. They will add organic matter, which is fertilizer, to the ground, and you end up with a lovely, soft, organic, rich soil. If you have a little bit of grass where those same needles are falling, that's fine unless the needles are a little bit too dense and they completely cover up the grass. So here, as it happens, our 3-year-old grandson has done a little bit of raking already, but you can see here, there's a little bit of extra pine needles, and all you got to do, you can leave some down there, but just rake a little bit of it up to where you've got ground cover, and you're done. And you can let the rest of these pine needles decompose onto the grass, and you end up with, again, with fertilizer. The grass is perfectly happy to be treated that way, and you end up with a softer soil and more organics. It's fertile, and more things will grow in it. The other thing you can do with the extra pine needles, if you want, if you have raised beds, if you're growing vegetables, like you can see in the arugula, I've put some pine needles there. It helps to fertilize those Those plants, there were tomatoes and peppers here, and I've got pine needles there that are going to decompose, and you can put them, you can basically put them anywhere, anywhere you want, and it will help. It'll help the soil and it'll help the plants. Here we are in the backyard, and you can see even more clearly if you look to my side. This is Sligo Creek Park. It's a very mature forest with a huge canopy of trees, and those trees all lose their leaves in the fall. They're all deciduous trees here. Those leaves fall to the ground and they stay there and they decompose, and they provide habitat for all sorts of different kinds of bugs and other beasties, and they're food in the winter for a lot of animals. So here we are right here, and we can extend the forest very easily to over here, and you can see this looks like forest floor. And the main reason it looks like forest floor is because we don't mow it, we don't plant grass on it, we let mostly native plants grow here, and there's some trees and shrubs, and this is habitat for fox and for deer and for all sorts of other beasties. And we've done the same thing as the yard progresses in a more planted area that's by and large natives, but the leaves fall on those plants and they don't smother them. They act just like it was in the forest floor. It's just the leaves will decompose, they fertilize the plants that are living there, and they support other animals. You may remember in the spring when the robins come back and are starting to, especially when they're starting to feed their babies, they're rooting, you see them rooting around among the leaves all the time. And that's because there's food there. They don't just do that because it's fun. They do that because they need the kind of food that survives in leaf litter in the wintertime. And that's how they're going to feed their babies. They don't feed their babies nuts or seeds or anything hard. They feed them little bugs and things that are living underground or living right under the leaves, and survive the winter. So that's really the critical point about why to leave the leaves. You don't need, in an area like this, there's no reason to remove those leaves. They pretty much stay put. It looks like a forest. There's nothing wrong with a forest, and they support, in a skinny little park like Sligo, they extend the habitat beyond that to our yards. So there's a little bitty part of this yard that is what you might call lawn. It's actually it's barely grass, but it's multi-species, and I mow it. So I don't want to have it completely full of leaves so it'll survive, so the sun can get to it. So what you can do here with leaves, and you can see there's not a ton of leaves, but there's enough so you'd want to break them up into littler bits so that the grass can continue to grow. It's a pretty straightforward process. The easiest way to do this is to take your mower and go back and forth, which will suck up the leaves and chop them into bits, kind of like what I'm going to show you with a vacuum blower. So here we go. I'm over this sort of low, and you can see I just made one pass, and you end up with the leaf litter. It's broken down into pretty fine particles, and just looking at the lawn, it looks very different. And you can see it looks like you can see the grass better, but there's all this organic matter from the leaves that's now in the ground, and because it's small particles, it's going to stay there for through the winter. And you're done. I chopped up leaves last year, similar to the mowing that I'm about to show you, the blower. And I put the leaves in a couple of garbage cans, and I've used them mostly for food composting, and we'll show you that in a little bit. But there's some leaves left, and as you can see here next to me, some of the soil, this is a very shady area, some of the soil has been somewhat exposed. So because I'm about to end up with a new set of chopped leaves, I'm going to take last year's leaves, dump them out. because they're more shredded, you can spread them out. And they will amend the soil, and they will tend to hold the soil better than just if it was bare. So this way you just keep, you haven't wasted anything. You're using last year's leaves to provide organics to the soil and to make more habitat for little beasties. So then I've got a nice empty bucket, and I'm gonna start using this blower, vacuum blower, not as a blower, but as a vacuum, to collect. You can see the deck. You can only imagine from this beautiful beech tree, there's about a bazillion leaves that come down every year. And since you don't want them on the deck, we've swept them about 5 times now, and you end up with piles of leaves. And I take some of those leaves and use the vacuum function of this, and the leaves will shred a little as they go in. They'll be collected in the bag, and then I put the bag shredded leaves here, and I've got this year's leaves, which I then can use for food composting or for putting around in other places.
Yes, so I guess there's a reverse function. She shredded the mower first.
The other thing I said you could use those shredded leaves for, as well as putting them on bare soil, is in food compost. And I know many folks in Takoma get their food compost taken away in a bucket, but not everybody does. And I've been doing food composting of vegetable matter for dozens of years. And here's my galvanized can. And it's about half done. You can see I've got a layer of leaves over it. And all I do, here's my kitchen vegetable waste.
For air
Yeah,
circulation.
yeah, you gotta have the air circulation.
So I've dumped that in, and then grab some of those shredded leaves. This is last year's leaves. And I cover it up. And then I rinse and repeat. So then, after several months, you end up with this, which doesn't look like vegetables at all. It looks like leaves. It's very soft, fluffy, moist organic matter. And for example, I've put it here, or partly you can see it, but also there's a little hill. And if the storm water is running down here, it will get stopped and absorbed by this lovely organic matter. So you can use this stuff. You can put it in among your gardens. You can make it a stormwater issue. Anywhere you want organic matter. It's fertilizer. It's very worm and bug friendly. And it's great stuff. And one of the nice things about it is you're not taking it from somebody else's yard. This is just your own. This is the stuff that you eat. There's going to be no weed seeds in it. There's going to just be your own leaves and your own vegetable foods.
And now we're going to go to Daryl Braithwaite's video from Takoma Park.
We're about to embark on Takoma Park's leaf collection program for 2020. This year is going to be a little different than most. Normally we start in mid-November and end in mid-December. We have 6 trucks working citywide to pick up leaves, and we stop by each street at least twice, usually more. This year, because of COVID, we can't bring in the normal number of seasonal workers that we usually have. Normally we bring in 12 seasonal workers to augment our 8 on-staff people. to run the collection program. Because of COVID, we don't want to bring in that many new people to the facility. All the public works employees are currently reporting to the office and working from the department. So we need to be very cautious about safety measures and protection. So because of limitations in number of vehicles and in safe spaces for staff and in limiting crew size, we're going to be reducing the number of trucks that pick up leaves this year. So instead of 6 trucks, we'll have 3. Then we will run through the end of December, December 31st. Normally, you could expect to see a leaf crew come by your house at least once every 2 weeks. This year, it'll probably be once a month. So we're hoping that in the 7-week program, we can get to each property at least twice. But it'll be much different than in prior years where we offered much more frequent collection. This year, we're going to just do the best we can with what we have. Our priority is to maintain safety and safe workplaces for our employees and provide the service the best way we can. So it's going to be a challenge, and we ask for people's patience. We still will be having the leaf collection hotline, which is a number that you could call when you had your leaves raked out, and we would get there within 10 days of your call. This year, you can still use the leaf collection hotline, but people need to be prepared that it could be several weeks before their leaf files are picked up. So crews will be out, and we will be offering the service. It'll just be less frequently and a slightly longer time frame where we'll be doing the collection. The city still offers the Monday once a week bagged collection for leaves or branches or brush. You can use trash cans or the paper bags, the large paper bags. That program is still offered and in place year round on Mondays. So if you'd prefer to bag your leaves, you certainly can, and we'll pick them up on Monday. The other thing we've been encouraging people to do is consider leaving leaves on their lawn, using the lawnmower to run over them, chip them into pieces and leave them on the lawn itself to provide nutrients for your soil, or to blow them into gardens and leaf beds or under your trees to use those leaves again to decompose and help enhance the soil nutrients, and also provide that nutrient level to your trees and your shrubs and your plants. So we have a lot of information both on the city's website as well as in the city newsletter, the October newsletter, encouraging people to consider alternatives to the raking their leaves out to the curb and instead use those resources on the lawns themselves. But for those that can't do that, we still will have the leaf collection vacuum program as well as the bag program on Mondays.
And I think that's it for Daryl. So I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes. I'm going to do the why and the how. And I want you to hold on to your hats a little bit for just the first point about why you should do this. Leaves overwintering, leaves in the fall and overwintering and into the spring are home to the following: shrews, snails, millipedes, salamanders, wood frogs, toads, butterflies, moths in the form of caterpillars, pupae, chrysalis, cocoons, eggs. That's just some of the things that live in the leaves, and you don't necessarily even see them. Those bugs and all those other things also can be food for things like chipmunks, birds in the spring, turtles, other amphibians. That should be enough all by itself, but there are additional issues. Leaves are also insulation. So a lot of the plants that you are growing have a better chance of survival, especially over a harsh winter, with a layer of leaves on them. Gardeners often already know this, but it's true not just of your raised beds or your formal garden, but also in general of plants that live under the forest layer. I shouldn't have to say that, but it limits your work. If you don't have to rake every speck of leaves off of your garden, you're going to save a lot of time and energy. And speaking of energy, it's also, if you're using a blower to get every last leaf off of your yard, you're using a lot of energy, and the relatively small amount of mowing and or vacuuming of some of the leaves is relatively a lot less energy. You can keep your biome more intact by keeping your leaves on your yard. People hear about mycorrhiza and fungi and all the wonderful things that those do to help your trees and your shrubs and everything to function as a group, as a family. And keeping your leaves on the ground helps, is a critical portion of that circle of life. You also don't need to buy mulch. You saw how I used those shredded leaves. They function in a lot of ways as mulch, only you don't have to buy it. It's already there, and shredding it up is pretty simple. So the how, I went, I don't need to go into much detail, except I want to, because you just saw the video, but the priority is important. All of those beasties that I first mentioned, they do better when the leaves are intact, when you're not moving them all around, when you're not shredding them, when you're not putting them in that garbage can I used. That's not a very friendly place for beasties to live. So the first thing is just let them fall, leave them on the ground, push them off into a corner. And if you've got too many leaves to do that, you can find a corner where you can pile them up. So that's number 2, pile them up just as plain old whole leaves, and let them decompose as a pile of leaves. Third is then using a mower to shred them up a little bit where there's too many leaves and you don't have somewhere else you can move them. And then fourth is using a vacuum blower to then shred them and put them again somewhere else. There are, so that's the sum of my talk here, but which is atypical for me. But I wanted to mention 2 really good sources for, and there are plenty of others, but 2 really good sources of information, a little bit more information. The Xerxes Society has a great Leaving the Leaves article. If you go to xerxes.org and to their blog, or just search Leave the Leaves, you will find it. And also there's something in Consumer Reports, but also the National Wildlife Federation has another Leave the Leaves article that's pretty good. The Xerxes Society one has a lot of more technical resources that help to reinforce all the more practical stuff that I've described. So I think that's it for me. So how do you want to handle, are there questions?
So yeah, we have some things, some points that were brought up. And I think that Kit, you answered one of these questions that came up early on about is it possible, let me just see. Okay, is it possible to have too many pine needles? Will it turn the soil too acidic? And Kit, you said it's not been a problem for the things that you've grown, ground cover veggies.
Right. I mean, it's, you know, if you've got, if the needles are underneath the pine tree, you've already got an acid situation anyway, so it's probably not going to make any difference. But as we all recommend, especially if you're growing particular kinds of plants, every few years you should do a soil test. See what the levels are, and if you're growing some things that really don't like it acid, you can do 2 things. You can either move them, or else you can amend the soil a little bit to make them a little happier.
Okay, and then, oh, this is from Ann Stone. She said, I'm currently in Western North Carolina. While we have been encouraged to leave our leaves, we were also asked to rake away from the house. It's to earn a Firewise designation, I think. I think that's very interesting.
But I mean, it is an interest. I mean, it's probably not the best thing to do if you're trying to keep from absorbing stormwater, for example, into your basement. It's probably not the best idea to pile up your leaves smack up against your house, just because that's then a very absorptive layer. So if you don't, and I don't do that either. So, but yeah, so don't pile the leaves up right next to your house if you want to try to limit some of where the water goes in. I mean, if we become a fire hazard area, then that's going to be a different problem.
Okay. So Wendy said, I have several mature oak trees hovering over my yard. I was told that the cellulose from the oak doesn't break down easily, and so they form a mat. I don't have a lawnmower, so I can't shred that way. Are there other ways to shred?
Well, the vacuum blower is not very expensive and it's pretty easy to use. I don't use a gas one, it's electric. And they're way more environmentally friendly than, you sometimes see those chipper machines. I actually have one, but we stopped using it a while ago. The particulates were ridiculous. It was really noisy, and the vacuum part of that vacuum blower does a pretty nice job of shredding up the leaves a little bit. But if you can leave those oak leaves, I mean, think about the forest. Nobody's in the forest shredding up those oak leaves, and there's plenty of oaks all around the forest here. They will break down. The worms will break them down. Other things, just natural accretion will break them down. The only issue is if you've got, very special plants, you may want to, keep the oak leaves a little bit away from those. But I think if you have a lawn, that's obviously an issue. But in a general ground cover area, it shouldn't be a huge problem. But if it is, just use a vacuum shredder.
The next question was from Carol. I heard or read somewhere that one shouldn't leave willow oak leaves around the tree. Disease risk, I guess, but nobody removes the leaves in the forest. Does it really matter? Is there anything special about willow oaks that makes them any different, Kit?
We used to have a willow oak in our previous house, and besides being an incredible pain in the neck to rake, which by itself argues for not raking them, I just think it was never a problem. They always, horticulturists recommend that if you have a diseased plant, which could be a tree or a shrub or whatever, then you want to remove the diseased parts, including your tomatoes, whatever, from the ground and take them away. But I think your normal willow oak, I have a hard time imagining that's going to be, for a healthy willow oak, I can't imagine that'd be a problem.
Okay, and
someone could disprove me, but it's just, that's the general principle, is healthy things, you don't need to remove them.
I do want to say, if anybody has any comments or anything, just, as we're talking, just unmute yourself and feel free to chime in. So Wendy asks, repiling up leaves, is there such a thing as too big a pile? For example, might a pile promote rodents?
The bigger piles will decompose more quickly and might well heat up, which would tend to discourage rodents. My fairly extensive experience with rodents, sadly, would indicate that leaf piles are not a big rodent problem. They don't want to eat leaves. They want to eat your food scraps, which is why as you might have seen in the video, I use a galvanized, completely covered can, which keeps out rodents completely effectively. And my experience is that plastic recycling tubs aren't as effective, or certainly the ones that have an open bottom are not so effective. And those do attract mice and rats. So, I've never seen that, or seen or read that leaf piles are a problem for rodents.
Kit, have you had a problem with the bottoms of those galvanized cans rusting out?
Sure.
Because I've had that happen and have to replace them, and they're kind of pricey.
Yes, they now, I've gone through several generations of those things, and the ones they now make them that stand up have little 2-inch high legs, And I think those bottoms are going to last a little bit longer. But I mean, I use them. If you smash down through the bottom, you will definitely break the bottoms faster. I don't tend to do that, but they last several years. 4 or 5 years for each of those cans. So you're right. You have to buy a new one every once in a while, but you don't have rodents, and over a slow period of time, you end up with pretty good compost.
So in the chat, you guys, Michael Wilpers pointed out that the Xerces Society link is in the leaving the leaves.
Down, because I spelled it.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, so Gil Winters asked, can you compost green brown material for too long? I'm starting my first compost pile this month and have no idea how long to turn it before it's done, or if the pile can decompose too much if left for too long a period. Any advice you can provide would be helpful.
I've never had that question. It's a slightly side question to the larger point, but a good big pile of compost with the proper amount of green and brown material and moisture will heat up and in the sun will heat up and decompose usually within a couple of months. My cans are underneath the beech tree in the shade, and they're small, so they don't heat up, and the decomposition doesn't actually kill weed seeds that much or anything, or other stuff. So that decomposition is much slower. But usually you can tell it's done. You saw in the video, you're holding on to the finished stuff, and the more it feels like soil, it's crumbly and crumbly. It doesn't look like either leaves or food anymore, then it's probably done. But once it's done, especially in the ideal decomposition situation, you've got a hot pile. When it's not hot anymore, it's done. But like for my pile, it's a different situation.
But I think to his point, can it decompose too much? Because I've been enjoying this like black decomposed matter from the Takoma Park Public Works. But I reckon that's 2 or 3 years, because it is amazing stuff. But I do wonder, I know that, I've read some writers, and Elliot Coleman is one, who talks about there is kind of a peak. If you're using it as fertilizer, I think we're probably talking about 2 different things here, but that there is a peak when those nutrients are bioavailable. And after that, it does kind of go down.
It could be. I mean, it could be that the fungi are more active a little earlier on than that beautiful black stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah. But I think it benefits the soil structure no matter what.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's good organic matter always.
Yeah. So speaking of biome, this is from Carol. Any reason not to give some of my overabundant supply to a relative who wants to start composting and has fewer leaves? I'm not sure if you mean
Back up the leaves and give them away.
You mean bags of
is
leaves?
Carol, yeah, who asked that question?
Well, people share
have
leaves.
more leaves than I could leave on my yard or compost. And she's just starting and doesn't have many leaves or anything. So I'm just wondering what I'm giving her if I give her some of my shredded leaves and grass to start her compost.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a reason why that's a problem. I mean, again, it's the more you can leave on your own yard is good. But if you're giving somebody leaves and grass to use as compost, you're not sending them to landfill. You're not using, presumably too much energy. It's the second or third best option, and you're helping somebody learn how to do it, which is great.
and I'm giving her all the bugs I'm learning to live with.
So Patricia has a question. Should flower beds be free of leaves at any point in the fall?
No, I don't, not from, from an environmental perspective. I mean, some people, there's a lot of rethinking that has to go on here. It's just this, it's the same way as with lawns. As I described that, I have a multi-species lawn, but there are a lot of people who want to, who are very frustrated by that and want to have just grass growing, and they want to grow it so it looks like, so it's always an inch or an inch and a half tall and looks like a putting green. And those folks don't want to have a single leaf on their grass. And a lot of, I think the same thing goes with flower beds, that people think of them as being, as not being full of leaves, and at any time, and just like they think about as being, just one perfect specimens, and for example, also after they're done blooming, and right around now, a lot of people cut, as we're about to have a frost tonight, cut all the dead things down to the ground, where if you again read that Xerxes Society article, it talks about the importance of leaving that stuff leaving that stuff up, so the birds can eat some of the seeds that are remaining, and bees and other things can use those dead stalks through the winter to live in, to lay their eggs in, and so a lot of people don't think that really looks ugly, but in fact it's a really good idea to leave that stuff much longer than what the traditional view was about how you handle a garden bed.
So from Carol again, moles seem to like to tunnel and live under where I let leaves pile up. And from Joan Fry, how do you toss your compost in the cans?
Probably does.
How do you toss it?
Yes,
Mold,
I guess you mean
Yeah.
how you turn them.
how you turn it, yeah.
Joan?
Right. Right. So
Yeah,
yes.
and then
So moles, moles visit my yard every once in a while. They don't just live under leaves. They just live, and they usually have their way with the earthworms. That seems to be their food. So they make their tunnels in my yard. They eat up their fill of earthworms, and they go to my next door neighbor, and then down the street, and then a few years later they come back. They don't, by and large, they don't do any harm to. They're part of the biome, and they don't, except for, noticing that I've got these tunnels that I'm stepping on in my yard or garden. I don't think they're a particular issue to worry about. In terms of my, my own odd composting, I've got a turner, but I pretty much stopped using it because it stopped working very well. So I just leave it. I let it decompose on its own time. That's why you saw I had like 3 or 4 cans. I fill one up, I go to the next one, I go to the next one, I go to the next one. By the time the 4th one's done, the first one is full, the first one is finished. So it's the laziest person's food composting you will ever encounter, but works fine.
So Kathy Michael says, my decade-old rotating compost tumblers on legs are rodent-proof and likely to last another decade or more. One is a Sunmar.
I people tell me that all the time, but I do have to say that I had 2 of those, and at one point rats chewed through them and made a nest inside one of them. So I no longer do that. Now, I think that's relatively rare, but I'm just saying they can chew through plastic.
Okay, so
but just make sure you keep using them with some regularity, so you know that you don't have rodents in them. if you have a tumbler. But a tumbler is a better idea than a plastic can that's on the ground that is obviously more easy access for rodents.
Okay, this is Wendy to everyone. I also started my first compost bin this fall. I was wondering how it will heat up during the winter. Does the heat of the decomposition overcome the cold temperatures?
Do other people have thoughts on that? I mean, I think it doesn't heat up as well. The sun isn't as hot or as direct.
It's just slower.
Yeah, it is slower. It'll slow
Just
down.
slower. Yeah.
I don't know about winter, but the compost I started maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago with grass and leaves was really hot when I put my hand in it,
Cool.
and it's in the shade.
That's great. It has to be a big enough pile to heat up. The little those little galvanized cans, I think even the sun are not big enough to really heat up effectively.
And then Carol says, I typically haven't turned my compost often, but this fall experimented with turning it weekly. I think weekly was too much.
Just a comment to somebody's question
Yeah.
about turning, not a question.
And then Indica, could you please give us a 101 on what you mean by green and brown and rotating and such? What do we need to begin composting food? What do we need to begin composting food with leaves, and also equipment needs?
She's asking me, I guess. That's fine. I mean, this is not, I mean, there's a science to this, but it's also in terms of gardeners, it's not an exact science, but it's the most effective, quickest composting includes browns, which are dried leaves, browns, sometimes little sticks and things. Green is can be green leaves, but more commonly grass if you do grass clippings, or if you're pulling weeds, that's green. And then you can incorporate as well into that vegetable matter, which will also give you some more moisture. So, and there is a I'm not going to go into what the ideal is, but you're supposed to have a relatively even proportion of brown and green at least, and you can experiment with that. So that's, and if you want perfection, there's a lot of resources, a lot of places about how to compost quickly and effectively. And the benefit of the hot compost is it will kill off any plant diseases or weed seeds that you have that are incorporated into that compost. And so then you can, with more, you can use that material in your vegetable gardens. Because the stuff that I create, help to create, I don't put in the vegetable garden because it doesn't heat up, and so I haven't killed weed diseases, leaf diseases or anything. So I put it in other places. But if you have a nice hot compost, you can use it in your vegetables.
So from Linda Tipton, left uncleared, the leaves in our flower beds form a thick mat. Should I be concerned that the plants, trees won't be getting enough water? I was told this years ago. Maybe it's an example of something to rethink. If we're taking our model as the forest, a healthy forest is going to have right now, and they certainly do right now, have a thick mat of leaves. So that is not going to hurt the trees. That is what happens in a forest. It is an ideal situation in a forest. Some of that matting of leaves will limit some of what some of the weeds or some of the
green, some of the ground covers that come up. It's a little different if you're talking about your plantings. But by and large, my experience with this is that in the spring, those plants will shoot their little shoots up through a pretty good mat of beech leaves, which is our thick leaf cover. And I'm not seeing any problem with any of those plants because most of them are dormant now. So it's not, you're not blocking the sun from those plants. And the plants, I've got Allegheny spurge, which is the native Pachysandra. And those are, stay above the leaf litter. The leaves with the wind, the leaves will blow around it and don't cover it up. So the things that remain green during the winter, those are still sticking up and getting the sun. So, but if you have some plants that you're concerned about that are evergreen and they're covered by leaf matter, just spread it out a little bit.
Elaine makes the comment, my tumbling composter has been going for many years also, and I have not had any rodent problems. Then this is from Emily and Jenner. I took my compost part a few days ago, nice results, but no worms at all. Is this a bad message?
If your compost is cooked, there won't be any worms in it because they get cooked. This is, I sometimes have worms in mine because it doesn't cook, but a nice hot compost will not have worms. This is not like worm composting with the little red worms that you can do in your house, inside your house, and you just have food and newspaper shredding and all that stuff. Then you have a bazillion worms. In an outdoor compost situation that gets hot, you shouldn't expect to see worms.
Okay.
Not hot enough.
That was the last one.
Does anyone else have any other questions or any thoughts that you want to bring up to?
If you think this is all hooey, you can also
Yeah, tell us you think it's hooey.
if you have an alternative view on this.
I do say for any bet, I got one of those vacuum shredders this year, and they're really cool. But on beds in the past, when I've let the leaves fall, I do find that if you just, if there's beds you're concerned about or plants that you feel like are getting sun, you just go around with the light rake, and just kind of fluff them up now and again, and they'll be fine.
I mean, we had that 3.5 inches of rain whenever that was, a week ago or so. Now I have to say that all the leaves had not fallen, but I didn't see any leaf matting from that rainfall. And the wind blows stuff around too quite nicely to try, especially when the leaves are drier. So that will tend to limit how much matting goes on.
Okay, so we have a few more things in the chat here. Claudia said, another benefit of mulching with leaves is that seeds from plant that reseed come up through the leaves in the spring. And from Michael Wilpers, let's say you have a butterfly garden trying to replicate a meadow without trees. Will leaves interfere with a butterfly garden? That's a good question.
Well, they won't interfere with it because as I said earlier, butterflies benefit from a layer of leaves because they lay their eggs underneath them, their pupae, their cocoons, there's all that stuff is supported by a good sized layer of leaves. If you've got if you're in a prairie, for example, then you're not going to probably have so many leaves because you're in a prairie. But in a mixed area like many of us live in with trees and some sun, that a leaf layer shouldn't be a problem. And again, it helps insulate the soil. It helps insulate the roots of the perennials that are going to be coming up again. And those plants are very effective at sending their shoots up in the spring through a leaf layer.
Okay, so Jeannie Weiss has a comment here. I joined this meeting because I just went through a Leaving the Leaves challenge. I didn't know there was such a thing. The committee I work with, which cares for the landscaping for the Connie Morella Public Library, had the objective of slowly augmenting soil in the parking lot islands to turn them green. I wrote the vendor contracted by Montgomery County to perform some landscaping services for this and other libraries. I messaged the person responsible for doing the work, asking if the leaves be left so we could put them in the islands, etc. I got no response, but a couple of us volunteers weeded, dumped some space filler soil, planted and raked leaves and put them on the islands. By Tuesday yesterday, when I returned to the library to check out our projects, the leaves were gone. I wrote General Services and was informed that landscaping contracts are the same across the board. The contracts are not drawn up to one vendor. The scope is the same regardless of vendor. We know where we have to go, but getting there is going to be very hard in. And then Ross sent another message that I can see that says, do our local governments need to do more to promote this approach? The leaf pickup programs get us conditioned to use our rakes.
Yep. Well, this is the same thing, there's governments tend to be a little bit schizophrenic about this. For example, a number of us have native plant yards and get wildlife certified and all, or have conservation landscapes that maybe we even get rainscapes rewards from the Department of Environmental Protection. And then some neighbor calls up a different department in the county and said, those people have, a weedy yard, you should make them mow it and clean it up. And so you have this fight, you have to remind the county that it's actually trying to do more of what the Department of Environmental Protection is doing than, this all mow thing. And I have to say that DEP is trying to work with landscapers to help to educate them about not blowing every leaf off of the ground. But it's slow, especially if you're talking about the mow and blow guys. They just, telling them not to put volcanoes up, of mulch up on trees, having them mow higher than lower, having them not blow all the leaves off of the grass it's a big, it's turning around a super tanker. It's not going to happen fast, but with the more people know why and how to do this, what the importance is of it, and some of the easy things about it, it's the more change we'll have. It's the same as when, and Michael Wilpers knows this, and we talk to parks and say, we don't want you to mow every square inch of the grass in parks. And in particular, we want you to leave this higher area and try to make a more prairie-like area. And they say, not mowing as much. We're going to save people power, gasoline for the mowers, and money to not do that. So you can, by speaking a language of making things simpler and cheaper and easier, those are some of the messages we can help to do to encourage people to change their minds. But it's, this is a slow process, which we should try to speed up, because it's not rocket science.
Thank you, Kit. This was really informative and really helpful. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Good, thanks. Well, I expect all of y'all to be acolytes. No, there's another word probably. Spread the word. Talk to your neighbors. It's not, again, it's not rocket science. And it's especially, for the Friends of Sligo Creek folks, for example, most of them are in the Sligo Creek watershed. By doing this, we're helping the health of the park. We're extending the way that the park, the forested land gets expanded well beyond just the bounds of the forest itself, of the park itself, which makes for a healthier biome. I mean, supports more different kinds of plants and animals than what are supported just by the park itself. And that's, we humans have to do that a little bit better, because we can't just have those healthy things be in the park. We have to support them in our own yards.
Every little bit helps.
Exactly.
So I don't see any other points or questions in the chat. Oh yeah, Michael Wilpers, and this is good. As Ken Bauer once said at a Maryland Native Plant Society meeting, we have to change the concept of what is beautiful.
Right.
And that's very, very true. It's so much about aesthetics as anything else.
But so many people now, especially in times of COVID, are spending a lot of times walking in the parks. They're walking in the forest. They're looking around and seeing the beauty of these trees and the leaves and the forest. And you can replicate that. You can help make your own yard look more like a forest. And there is beauty in that, just like there is as you're walking through the park. Sounds like we're done.
Yeah, unless somebody else has something they want to say. Thank you so much, Kit. This has just been great. And just for so many of us, just really great news, great information.
Well, I'm delighted, and it's I'm kind of glad we got a little off target with composting, but composting is partly about how you use those leaves effectively, and so that's a good thing. And thank you all.
Okay, everybody, thank you for being here.
And thank you, City of Takoma Park. I appreciate the taping and the the extra work that they went through to help to deal with this. So I appreciate John and Alvaro and Bien and others. Daryl too.
Okay, everybody, remember to leave the leaves.
Leave the leaves.
And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Kit.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.